A Coast Guard or Coast Guard is a maritime security organization of a particular country. The term implies widely different responsibilities in different countries, from being a heavily armed military force with customs and security duties to being a volunteer organization tasked with search and rescue functions and lacking any law enforcement powers. However, a typical Coast Guard's functions are distinct from typical functions of both the Navy and a transportation police. History. The modern Her Majesty's Coast Guard of the United Kingdom was established in 1809 as the Water Guard, and was originally devoted to the prevention of smuggling as a department of the Customs and Excise Authority. It was, however, also responsible for giving assistance to shipwrecks. Each Water Guard station was issued with Manby's mortar, which was invented by Captain George William Manby in 1808. The mortar fired a shot with a line attached from the shore to the wrecked ship and was used for many years up and down the coastline. This began the process in which the Coast Guard assumed a life-saving role. In 1821 a committee of inquiry recommended that responsibility for the preventative Water Guard be transferred to the Board of Customs. The Treasury agreed and in a minute dated January 15, 1822, directed that the preventative services, which consisted of the preventative Water Guard, cruisers, and riding officers, should be placed under the authority of the Board of Customs and in future should be named the Coast Guard. In 1845 the Coast Guard was subordinated to the Admiralty. In 1829 the first Coast Guard instructions were published and dealt with discipline and directions for carrying out preventative duties. They also stipulated that when a wreck took place, the Coast Guard was responsible for taking all possible action to save lives, to take charge of the vessel and to protect property. In the United States the Lifesaving Service was formed in 1848. Unmanned lifesaving stations were established by the USLSS along the New Jersey coast south of New York Harbor with surf boats, rockets, carronades and other necessary apparatus for the better preservation of life and property from shipwrecks. The USLSS merged with the United States Revenue Cutter Service to form the United States Coast Guard in 1915. Role. Among the responsibilities that may be entrusted to a Coast Guard service are, search and rescue, enforcement of maritime law, safety of vessels, maintenance of SAR marks, and border control. During wartime, some national Coast Guard organizations might have a role as a naval reserve force with responsibilities in harbor defenses, port security, naval counterintelligence and coastal patrols. The Coast Guard may, varying by jurisdiction, be part of a country's military, a law enforcement agency, or a search and rescue body. For example, the United States Coast Guard is a military branch with a law enforcement capacity, whereas the United Kingdom's Her Majesty's Coast Guard is a civilian organization whose only role is search and rescue. Most Coast Guards operate ships and aircraft including helicopters and seaplanes that are either owned or leased by the agency in order to fulfill their respective roles. Some Coast Guards, such as the Irish Coast Guard, have only a very limited law enforcement role, usually in enforcing maritime safety law, such as by inspecting ships docked in their jurisdiction. In cases where the Coast Guard is primarily concerned with coordinating rather than executing rescue operations, lifeboats are often provided by civilian voluntary organizations, such as the Royal National Lifeboat Institution in the United Kingdom, whilst aircraft may be provided by the country's armed forces, such as the Search and Rescue Sea Kings operated by the Royal Air Force and Royal Navy, in addition to any of the HMCG's own helicopters. Type and role by country. The following lists a select number of Coast Guards around the world, illustrating the varied roles they play in the respective governments and the countries they operate in. Argentina the Argentine Naval Prefecture, in Spanish Prefectura Naval Argentina or PNA, is a service of the Argentine Republic's Security Ministry charged with protecting the country's rivers, lakes and maritime territory. It therefore fulfills the functions of other countries' coast guards, and furthermore acts as a gendarmerie force policing navigable rivers and lakes. They belonged to the Ministry of Defense until the 1980s, and the Corps' highest official was a Navy Rear Admiral. They have since been transferred to the Ministry of Interior and, more recently, to the newly created Ministry of Security. However, in case of armed conflict, they can be put under Navy Air's command. Australia while having 19,650 kilometers of coastline, the Commonwealth of Australia does not have a force purely to defend its coast. The duty of patrolling its coastline falls to the Royal Australian Navy, the Australian Customs, and the police services of the several states and territories. In addition, there are several private volunteer Coast Guard organisations, the two largest organisations being the Royal Volunteer Coastal Patrol and the Australian Volunteer Coast Guard. These volunteer organisations have no law enforcement powers, and are essentially auxiliary search and rescue services. In NSW, these two organisations have joined to become Marine Rescue in 2009. Bangladesh. The Bangladesh Coast Guard's officers are transferred from the Bangladesh Navy. While under the remit of the Ministry of Home Affairs, the Coast Guard is part of the country's military. Barbados. Bosnia and Herzegovina. Having 18 kilometers of coastline only, Bosnia-Herzegovina does not have a force dedicated to defend its coast. The duty of patrolling its coastline falls to the Granier Polishija. Brazil. In addition to the roles of a traditional navy, the Brazilian Navy also carries out the role of organizing the merchant navy and other operational safety missions traditionally conducted by a Coast Guard. Other roles include conducting national maritime policy, and implementing and enforcing laws and regulations with respect to the sea and inland waters. Canada. The Canadian Coast Guard is a civilian service under the Department of Fisheries and Oceans responsible for patrolling the world's longest coastline of 243,042 kilometers. The CCG holds responsibility for all marine search and rescue throughout Canada. The CCG coordinates search and rescue operations with the Canadian Armed Forces, Royal Canadian Mounted Police, and other organizations. The CCG maintains and operates AR marks, coastal light stations, vessel traffic services, marine pollution response services, marine communication systems, and provides icebreaking services. The CCG also operates all federal scientific research and hydrographic survey vessels. To accomplish these tasks, the CCG has a sizable fleet of vessels and aircraft, all serviced from various bases and smaller stations located on 3 coasts and the Great Lakes and St. Lawrence River. The Canadian Coast Guard College is located near Sydney, Nova Scotia. China. The People's Republic of China used to operate several Coast Guard agencies. In March 2013, China announced it would combine the assets of 4 separate maritime law enforcement agencies to form a unified Coast Guard, administrated by the State Oceanic Administration. The new Coast Guard has been in operation since July 2013. The current China Coast Guard serves as a coordinating body for maritime search and rescue in the territorial waters of the People's Republic of China. The China Coast Guard was previously a maritime branch of the Public Security Border Troops, a paramilitary police force under the leadership of the Ministry of Public Security. Since 2013, it is administered by the State Oceanic Administration. The former China Maritime Safety Administration was a government agency which coordinated maritime search and rescue in the territorial waters of the People's Republic of China. The CMSA was part of the Ministry of Transport. The former China Marine Surveillance, created on October 19, 1998, was a paramilitary maritime law enforcement agency of the State Oceanic Administration of the FIOPLI unregistered trademark S Republic of China. The force was responsible for enforcing laws and order within China unregistered trademark S territorial waters, exclusive economic zones, and shores. Protecting the maritime environment, natural resources, navigation aids and other facilities. And carrying out maritime surveys. In emergencies, these forces could also be deployed for other missions such as search and rescue. The former China Fisheries Law Enforcement Command, Chinese, a 1/2 an organ of the Fisheries Management Bureau under the PRC Ministry of Agriculture, was responsible for the enforcement of laws concerning fishing and maritime resources within PSCA unregistered trademark S territorial waters and exclusive economic zones. FLICA unregistered trademark S responsibilities included protecting Chinese fishing vessels and personnel, resolving disputes in fishing activities, preventing illegal fishing, and protecting maritime resources. Cyprus equals. The Cyprus Port and Marine Police fulfills the functions of other countries' coast guards for the Republic of Cyprus. Cyprus is an island country in the eastern Mediterranean with almost 40% of its territory under occupation after a Turkish military invasion. Due to the counter-unregistered trademark S geopolitical situation, size, the recent discovery in 2011 of the Aphrodite gas field in its exclusive economic zone and Cyprus Police being the main national law enforcement agency, the duties and responsibilities of the Cyprus Port and Marine Police are many and sometimes complex. It is a unit of the Cyprus Police, which resides under the Ministry of Justice and Public Order. However, it can support the Cyprus Navy in wartime, which resides under the Ministry of Defense. It is staffed by police officers which can be transferred to and from other units and agencies of the Cyprus Police and are tasked with the primary mission of policing the counter-unregistered trademark SC borders and the law enforcement of the waters around it. The unit is equipped with patrol boats and radars, but it does not operate its own helicopters. Instead, it operates in combination with the aerial unit of the Cyprus Police, the Cyprus Police Aviation Unit. Main roles include law enforcement against illicit activities such as smuggling, terrorism, piracy, illegal fishing, illegal drug trade, illegal immigration, and is also assigned with search and rescue duties. For counter-terrorism and anti-piracy operations, the units operate in combination with a special anti-terrorist squad which is part of the emergency response unit of the Cyprus Police. Although the prominent agencies responsible for all search and rescue operations are conducted by Cyprus Police units, the agency responsible to organize the SAR system, to coordinate, to control and direct SAR operations in the region that the Republic of Cyprus is responsible for is the Cyprus Joint Rescue Coordination Center or JRCC Larnaca, which is an independent agency of the Ministry of Defense. France equals. In the French Republic, Affaires Maritimes is the closest organization to coast guards. In each region, a naval admiral, called Copyright Fait Maritime, is in charge of coordination of all state services for action at sea. The charity, Socia Copyright Nationale de Sauvetage en Mer, provides most life-saving duties at the local level. Germany equals. The German Federal Coast Guard, known as the K1 is both a civilian service and a law enforcement organization, staffed with both police officers and certain civilians from the various German federal agencies associated with maritime administration with responsibility for the coordination of all law enforcement activities within its jurisdiction in the Federal Republic of Germany. Greece equals. The Hellenic Coast Guard is the national coast guard of the Republic of Greece. It is a paramilitary organization that can support the Hellenic Navy in wartime, but resides under separate civilian control in times of peace. It was founded in 1919 by an Act of Parliament and the legal framework for its function was reformed in 1927. Haiti equals. The Haitian Coast Guard is an operational unit of the Haitian National Police. It is one of the few law enforcement organizations in the world to combine water policing and Coast Guard duties while remaining as a policing unit. It operates primarily as a law enforcement agency, with secondary responsibilities in search and rescue. Hong Kong equals. In Hong Kong, law enforcement duties are carried out by the Marine Region of Hong Kong Police Force and the Customs and Excise Department. The Hong Kong Maritime Rescue Coordination Center coordinates search and rescue vessels, aircraft and other resources of the Fire Services Department, Government Flying Service, Marine Department and the Marine Police. Iceland equals. The Icelandic Coast Guard has primarily been a law enforcement organization but is also in charge of national defenses. It has also involved with the Republic of Iceland's contributions to expeditionary operations and conducted military exercises. For example, Operation Enduring Freedom and Northern Challenge. India equals. In the Republic of India, the Indian Coast Guard is Armed Forces of Union, under Ministry of Defence and, in contrast with some Coast Guard units, resembles a naval coastal defence force. It has responsibility for search and rescue, enforcement of maritime law, smuggling, immigration and shipping regulations, and protecting the country's maritime and offshore resources. Ireland equals. The Irish Coast Guard makes up one arm of the Maritime Safety Services, the other being the Maritime Safety Directorate. Both arms are due to merge into a new one-stop-shop agency for all maritime safety matters. The purpose of the Irish Coast Guard is to reduce the loss of life within the Irish search and rescue region and on rivers, lakes and waterways, and to protect the quality of the marine environment within the Irish Pollution Responsibility Zone, harbours and maritime local authority areas, and to preserve property. To promote safety standards, and by doing so, prevent, as far as possible, the loss of life at sea and on inland waters and other areas, and to provide an effective emergency response service. Isle of Man equals. The Isle of Man is a Crown dependency located in the Irish Sea between Ireland and the United Kingdom. It is not part of the United Kingdom, but historically relied upon the UK Coast Guard. However, the UK Coast Guard withdrew in 1988, and the Isle of Man government formed its own Coast Guard in 1989. Its key functions are coastal patrol, pollution control, and shore-based search and rescue. It also cooperates with other agencies as part of the Isle of Man Inland Search and Rescue Group. It maintains the Isle of Man's Marine Operations Centre, but has no aircraft, and contracts air-sea rescue to the UK Coast Guard. Italy equals. In the Republic of Italy, the Guardia Costiera is part of the Italian Navy under the Ministry of Infrastructure and Transport. They have responsibility for enforcement of shipping and maritime safety regulations, as well as performing search and rescue duties. Japan equals. In Japan, the Japan Coast Guard is under the oversight of the Ministry of Land, Infrastructure, Transport and Tourism, and is responsible for the protection of the coastlines and islands of Japan. Jersey equals. The island of Jersey Coast Guard is the Coast Guard service of the Government of Jersey, an independent Crown dependency located near to northern France. Its main responsibilities are safety at sea, maritime security and law enforcement, search and rescue services, and protection of the marine environment. Channel Islands Air Search works with the Coast Guard service on search and rescue operations, and therefore the Coast Guard does not maintain its own aircraft. South Korea equals. The Korea Coast Guard is responsible for maritime safety and control off the coast of the Republic of Korea, South Korea. The KCG is an external branch of the ROK's Ministry of Maritime Affairs and Fisheries during peacetime. Malaysia equals. In the Malaysia Maritime Enforcement Agency or Royal Malaysian Coast Guard is part of the Malaysian Civil Service and is under the Prime Minister's Department. The agency is headed by a Director General who is appointed by the Yang di-Pertuan on the advice of the Prime Minister, while other personnel are appointed by the Public Service Commission. In times of war, crisis or emergency, the agency may be placed under the command of the Royal Malaysian Armed Forces. It was formed to combat the rise of piracy in the Strait of Malacca. Personnel often work very closely with the Royal Malaysian Navy and Royal Malaysian Air Force. The Coast Guard operates a Special Forces Commando or STAR unit, which was absorbed from the Navy's Pascal and Air Force's Pascal. The agency utilizes its resources in a maritime law enforcement and search and rescue capacity. Mexico equals. The Maritime Search and Rescue is a unit of the Mexican Navy. Its primary mission is search and rescue operations within 50 miles of the Mexican coastline. Netherlands equals. The Kingdom of the Netherlands Coast Guard is a national organization responsible for various services along the Netherlands ocean coastline. Caribbean Netherlands equals. The Dutch Caribbean Coast Guard is the Coast Guard of the Kingdom of the Netherlands in the Caribbean. providing search and rescue, and maritime law enforcement in Aruba, Kuala Section, Bonaire, St Eustatius and Saba. New Zealand. The Royal New Zealand Coast Guard is a civilian volunteer charitable organisation, providing search and rescue services to coastal waterways and some lakes in New Zealand. Smaller incidents are coordinated by the New Zealand Police, who may call on the services and resources of the Coast Guard. Larger incidents are managed by the Rescue Coordination Centre New Zealand, with support from the Royal New Zealand Defence Force. Norway. The Royal Norwegian Coast Guard, or Kystvakten in Norwegian, is a part of the Royal Norwegian Navy, but has separate vessels, many of which are purpose-built. Coast Guard vessels have the prefix KV. 4 of these vessels are capable of embarking 1 or more helicopters. Norway's exclusive economic zone, the Coast Guard's area of responsibility, is about 2.2 million square kilometers, one of the largest in Europe. Pakistan. In Islamic Republic of Pakistan, there are 2 units operated as Coast Guards: the Maritime Security Agency under the Pakistan Navy and the Pakistan Coast Guard. The MSA is a military force operated by the Navy under the direction of Ministry of Defence in its right. The Pakistani Coast Guard are placed under the Pakistan Army and has responsibilities for protecting coastal and shores of Karachi, while the MSA has entire area of responsibility of the Republic of Pakistan's coastlines in terms of strategic security, as well as law enforcement within the country's exclusive economic zone. Peru. Philippines. In the Republic of the Philippines, the Philippine Coast Guard is a maritime law enforcement agency operating under the Department of Transportation and Communications of the Republic of the Philippines government. It is tasked with the broader enforcement of maritime laws, especially against smuggling, illegal fishing, drug trafficking, and piracy. It patrols the country's 36,289-kilometer coastline and hundreds of islands, and is also involved in maritime search and rescue missions, as well as the protection of the marine environment. Poland. In Poland, the Coast Guard role is performed by the maritime branch of the Polish Border Guard. It is part of the Border Guard. Portugal. In Portugal, the Coast Guard role is performed by several government agencies that, together, form the Sistema de Autoridade Maritima or SAM. The SAM includes the Portuguese Navy, the National Republican Guard, the Portuguese Air Force, the Border and Immigration Service, the Civil Protection Authority, the National Medical Emergency Institute and the Criminal Investigation Police. The Autoridade Maritima Nacional or AMN is the branch of the Portuguese Navy responsible for its Coast Guard role. The function of AMN is performed by the Chief of Staff of the Navy himself, supported in this role by the Directorate of the Maritime Authority, which includes the Maritime Police, the Lifeguard Institute, the Lighthouse Department and the several harbour masters. Besides the specific assets of the Directorate of Maritime Authority entirely dedicated to the Coast Guard role, the AMN also has at its disposal the other Portuguese Navy's assets that can be used both for military and public service missions. The vessels operated within the SAM include the Maritime Police patrol boats, the Lifeguard Institute lifeboats, the Harbour Masters harbour boats, the GNR Coastal Control Unit surveillance boats and the Portuguese Navy's naval ships. The aircraft operated within the SAM include fixed-wing aircraft from the Portuguese Air Force and helicopters from the Navy, the Air Force and the Civil Protection Authority. Russian Federation. Russia's Coast Guard operates under the auspices of the Border Guard Service of Russia. Its remit encompasses the 12-mile limit of all Russian territorial and coastal waters and, being equipped with frigates, corvettes, fast patrol boats, hydrofoils, helicopters, and light aircraft, it has considerable combat capability on behalf of the continent-wide Russian Federation. Singapore. In Singapore, the Police Coast Guard is an operational department of the Singapore Police Force. Functions of the Coast Guard were transferred from the Republic of Singapore Navy to what was then the Marine Police in February 1993. The Marine Police was thus restructured and renamed as the Police Coast Guard, one of the few law enforcement organizations in the world to combine water policing and Coast Guard duties while remaining as a policing unit. It operates primarily as a law enforcement agency, with secondary responsibilities in search and rescue. Spain Kingdom of Spain operates several Coast Guard agencies. The Sociedad de Salvamento y Seguridad Marítima, also known as Salvamento Marítimo, or by its acronym SESMA, is the body in charge of maritime traffic control, safety and rescue operations, as well as protection of the maritime environment, but lacks any law enforcement responsibilities. The agency runs 20 rescue coordination centers, employs a staff of 1,500 and operates a fleet of 19 vessels, 54 boats, 8 helicopters and 4 airplanes. Customs and border protection functions in the Kingdom of Spain are carried out by the Servicio Marítimo de la Guardia Civil, with a staff of 1,100 and a fleet of 67 patrol vessels and speedboats. Salvamento Marítimo operates in the 4 international SAR areas assigned to Spain: Atlantico, Canarias, Estrecho and Mediterraneo, covering a combined extension of 1.5 million square kilometers. During a maritime emergency, Salvamento Marítimo is responsible for the coordination of other possible responders, like the Spanish Navy or the Servicio or Copyright Rio de Rescate, that comprises Squadrons 801, 802 and 803 of the Spanish Air Force. Coordination on land, sea and air are made with the North Atlantic Treaty Organization, and Cooperative European Union. Galicia The autonomous community of Galicia has their own separate Coast Guard service, the Serviço de Guarda Costas de Galicia or simply Guarda Costas de Galicia. It is the Galician government agency responsible for the coast and fisheries surveillance, the maritime search and rescue and the protection of the sea environment. The Guarda Costas de Galicia operates a fleet of more than 20 vessels and 3 helicopters, from the bases of Vivero, Ferrol, A Coruña plus or minus A, Muir, Porto do Sun, Ribeira, Vilagarca de Arousa, Pontevedra and Vigo. The Guarda Costas de Galicia was created in 2004, by the fusion of the former Serviço de Vigilancia Pesqueira and the Serviço de Busca e Salvamento. Sri Lanka In Sri Lanka, until 2009 a Coast Guard unit existed under the Ministry of Fisheries and Aquatic Resources, responsible for fishery and natural resource protection coastal areas. A new Department of Coast Guard was created under the Department of Coast Guard Bill presented to Parliament in 2009. The department would be under the purview of the Ministry of Defence and be staffed by civilian personnel. The department's responsibilities include search and rescue, law enforcement within the country's exclusive economic zone, conducting anti-smuggling and anti-immigration operations, suppression of terrorist activities in territorial waters of Sri Lanka. Sweden The Royal Swedish Coast Guard is a Swedish civilian government agency with combination of police tasks, border control, maritime rescue and environmental control. Coast Guard officers carries the same equipment and similar uniforms to regular Swedish police officers. Tasks: maritime surveillance and other control and inspection tasks as well as environmental cleanup after oil spills at sea, coordinate the civilian needs for maritime surveillance and maritime information, follow international development within the field and take part in international efforts to establish border controls, law enforcement at sea, environmental protection at sea and other maritime surveillance tasks. The Royal Swedish Coast Guard carries out some of its surveillance by air, and some on ice and snow. It also has marine duties in Lake Varkaransinön, Europe's third largest lake, operating out of Varkaransinäsborg. Taiwan In the Republic of China government, on the island of Taiwan, the Coast Guard Administration, ROCCGA is both a military and a law enforcement organization. The ROCCGA is considered a civilian law enforcement agency under the administration of the Executive Yuan, though during wartime it may be incorporated as part of the ROC military. Its primary roles are in ensuring the safety and security of the Republic Islands waters and coordinating search and rescue efforts. ROCCGA is instituted a Maritime Patrol Directorate General and a Coast Patrol Directorate General. Officers of the Maritime Patrol Directorate General are law executors, but officers of the Coast Patrol Directorate General are considered soldiers who have partial law enforcement power. Trinidad and Tobago The Trinidad and Tobago Coast Guard is the maritime division of the Trinidad and Tobago Defense Force. It is within the government portfolio of the Ministry of National Security. The commanding officer of the Coast Guard reports to the Chief of Defense Staff. The TTCG is responsible surveillance, search and rescue, fisheries enforcement, pollution enforcement, and counter-narcotics operations for maritime jurisdiction of Trinidad and Tobago. Turkey The Turkish Coast Guard of the Republic of Turkey is a branch of the Turkish Armed Forces and was initially founded in 1859. During peacetime, it is under the command of the Ministry of Interior. However, during war or emergency time, it falls under the command of the Turkish Navy. On July 13, 1982, it was assigned to the Turkish Gendarmerie, becoming both a military and a law enforcement service. Finally, the organization obtained its current form on January 1, 1985. The Coast Guard is responsible for enforcement of Turkish maritime law and controlling of the Republic of Turkey's coasts and the responsibility area. It is also the main search and rescue coordination authority for the Turkish coastal zone. The Coast Guard consists of 4 area commands, as the Black Sea, the Sea of Marmara and adjacent straits, the Aegean Sea, and the Mediterranean Sea. The Turkish Coast Guard maintains a fleet of coastal patrol ships and small craft, as well as helicopters and fixed-wing aircraft. United Kingdom In the United Kingdom, Her Majesty's Coast Guard is purely concerned with search and rescue. It has no role in the maintenance of SAR marks, which is instead the responsibility of Trinity House, the Northern Lighthouse Board and the Commissioners of Irish Lights, nor has it any concern with customs enforcement, which is the responsibility of the Her Majesty's Revenue and Customs. Coast Guard does not possess many of its own lifeboats but does have several MCA Falcons, which are a type of lifeboat that are used in areas that might not necessarily have a lifeboat provided by the volunteer Royal National Lifeboat Institution or other independent units, although it often wet leases commercial helicopters mainly Sikorsky S-92s and Aegistorland AW-139s and tugs to provide search and rescue cover in certain areas. It does, however, maintain a number of search, cliff and mud rescue teams as well as some inshore rescue boats and is a coordinating body and public face for the maritime search and rescue services. It is part of the Maritime and Coast Guard Agency, which in itself is an executive agency of the Department for Transport. Cooperation is made with the Royal Navy, the Royal Air Force and the all-volunteer National Coast Watch Institution, which mans many of the vacated former Coast Guard watchhouses along the coast. Scotland. The Scottish Fisheries Protection Agency is responsible for both deterring illegal fishing in Scottish waters, as well as monitoring the compliance of the fisheries industry in Scotland with the relevant Scottish and European Union laws on fisheries. Ukraine. Ukrainian Sea Guard is the Coast Guard service of Ukraine, subordinated to its Border Guard Service, the local successor of the Soviet border troops naval units that have been similarly responsible for Coast Guard tasks. However, there were some interchanges in units, ships and personnel between Sea Guard and the Ukrainian Navy. Operates 4 Sea Guard Detachment, a Sea Guard Cutters Division in Mariupol, a Special Purpose Sea Guard Cutters Division in Yalta, and a Riverine Dnieper Sea Guard Cutters Division in Kiev. Sea Guard administration is split between the ATSA Black Seas Regional Administration in Simferopol and the Southern Regional Administration in Odessa. Service persons of the Sea Guard wear either the black uniform similar to Ukrainian Navy, but decorated with some green elements, or a common uniform of the Border Guard. United States. Established in 1790, the U.S. Coast Guard is both a military and a law enforcement service. It is one of the 7 uniformed services of the United States and one of the 5 services of the United States Armed Forces. Its role includes enforcement of U.S. maritime law, coastal defense, and search and rescue. During peacetime the USCG falls under the administration of the United States Department of Homeland Security. During wartime, the USCG may, at the direction of the President of the United States, report to the Secretary of the Navy. Its resources, however, are integrated into U.S. military operations in wartime. The USCG maintains an extensive fleet of coastal and ocean-going patrol ships, called cutters by tradition, and small craft, as well as an extensive aviation division consisting of HH-65 Dolphin and MH-60J Hawk helicopters and fixed-wing aircraft such as the C-130 Hercules, HU-25 Guardian, and HC-144 Ocean Sentry. USCG helicopters are equipped with hoists to rescue survivors and also play a major role in law enforcement. The helicopters are able to land and take off from USCG cutters, making them an indispensable tool in fighting illegal drug traffic and the influx of illegal immigrants. The fixed-wing aircraft are used for long-range search and rescue and law enforcement patrols. A construction and repair shipyard has been maintained since 1899 in the Baltimore Harbor area at Curtis Bay, United States Coast Guard Yard at Curtis Bay, Maryland. Today's lighthouses on the American coasts are all run by the U.S. Coast Guard, from the previous old U.S. Lighthouse Service. The list of active lighthouses, lighted beacons, etc. that provide detailed information on aids to navigation with their locations and characteristic signals is currently maintained by the U.S. Coast Guard in its light list issued each year. Uruguay In the Republic of Uruguay, the Coast Guard is a part of the Navy. It is tasked with the broader enforcement of maritime laws, especially against smuggling, illegal fishing, drug trafficking and piracy. It patrols the country's coastline, and is also involved in maritime search and rescue missions, as well as the protection of the marine environment. The Uruguayan Coast Guard also frequently patrols coast areas via foot and on patrol vehicles which they are assigned jurisdictions which are called subprefecturas. Prefectura is also responsible for the International Port of Montevideo operability. Even though the Uruguayan Coast Guard is a military organization, they frequently help out law enforcement agencies. It must also maintain the safety of navigation and be a maritime authority on rivers, the Atlantic Ocean, the River Plate and lakes in the jurisdiction of the Navy and intervene in the flagging of vessels. In 2015, there are plans for the Uruguayan Coast Guard to pass and depend entirely on the Ministry of Interior, meaning it would not be a military unit anymore. Vietnam Vietnam Coast Guard is part of Ministry of Defense, and it patrols and controls in accordance with the laws of the Socialist Republic of Vietnam and international treaties concerned such as the United Nations Convention on the Law of the Sea. Besides maritime search and rescue missions, Vietnam Coast Guard missions include protection the sovereignty and jurisdiction of the waters of Vietnam, protection of natural resources, prevention of environmental pollution, detection and prevention of acts of smuggling, piracy and illegal transportation and trafficking of illegal narcotics or precursors. See also, Chief Coast Guard, Maritime Security Regimes, Port Security. References. External links, download records of service of the UK Coast Guard 1816 to 1947.